to look at other things that are going on, and nothing negative on the on KAU. I just feel that this issue, I don't want to get where we're fighting over something at this point, which really we're not going to need to be fighting for if we wait. So I'm going to move. I want Ms. Ford to have a last comment, but I do move to table that. Actually, I'd like to postpone it until May 30th.
Okay, so the motion to postpone to May 30th,
30th.
seconded by Mr. Onishi, I believe. Okay. On the motion to postpone, Ms. Will, I think you explained it, but do you have anything else to add to the
No, I
postponement?
don't.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Okay, so we're taking comments on the motion to postpone. Mr. Onishi?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Yeah, I'll support that, and hopefully things can be adjusted from this amendment. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Ford?
Well, obviously don't support the postponement. I have no problem taking out the Kahala stuff at all. I mean, I did that as a courtesy to someone I knew was trying to open an office. But the postponement isn't gaining us anything. We're still not dealing with the fact that the council rule says we can't pay for this stuff, operational stuff, out of the contingency budget. Everybody's ignoring that. You're also ignoring, oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the bill. I'm sorry. But the postponement, this can be changed right now by the end of the, table it to the end of the rest of the discussion. I can have my staff take out Kohala. The other items, though, it's hard not to talk about what these items are in here for. They're trying to deal with the issues that have not been resolved in the last 5 months by the management of this council. So I oppose the postponement.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion to postpone? Hearing or seeing none, Mr. Clerk, on the motion to postpone to May 30th.
Ms. Young.
Aye.
Ms. Ford.
No.
Mr. Iligan.
Aye.
Mr. Kanuha.
Aye.
Mr. Kern.
Aye.
Mr. Onishi.
Aye.
Ms. Poindexter.
Aye.
Ms. Willie.
Aye.
Chair Yoshimoto.
Aye.
Chair Yoshimoto, you have 8 ayes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk. So, communication 150.42 is postponed to May 30th. Next item, Ms. Ford, which one do you want to take up?
Going back to the top of the memos, memo number 3, I move to amend Bill 39 with the contents, draft 2 as amended, with communication 15033.
We need a second, Ms. Ford. Seconded by Mr. Onishi. Go ahead, Ms. Ford.
Thank you. I did an extensive amount of work with all the various departments, and this particular memo addresses the prosecuting attorney. I don't know how many of you have taken the tour through the prosecutor's office to see understand what the situation is in the caseload, the ability of the prosecutor to put the bad guys in jail. And so when I looked at the mayor's budget, which I absolutely appreciate, I felt after my discussion with the prosecutor from the previous discussions that this didn't quite get us to where we needed to be even be at a, I won't say a minimal level, but a good functioning level. I felt we needed one more deputy prosecutor, and this is not my opinion. I'm supporting the prosecutor's office in this. One more deputy prosecutor, 2 legal clerks, 1 account clerk, and 2 student interns. That comes to the bill. As you can see, it's we're adding $290,122 to this budget, and it does come from the fund balance. So I'd like to comment now on the fund balance. Everything you heard is correct. There wasn't anything that you heard that wasn't correct. But here's my position. You heard multiple times from the mayor that we have a very conservative, and I quote, very conservative policy on the fund balance, and it has served us well in the past. However, we're at a point where it is not going to serve us well in the future. I'm not saying that every year we should blow through the fund balance. I'm saying that in this particular year, as we are starting to climb out of the abyss of the financial meltdown in this country, that if we don't make these strategic investments in these different departments in staff and equipment, that we are going to continue to slide backwards. This is one of them. So I would like to call Mr. Roth forward. And there's nothing else I need to say about this. Mr. Roth, when I went through the prosecutor's office, and this was, I don't know, 3 years ago, something like that, I don't quite remember. This was when you were not the prosecutor. And I was pretty horrified at the caseloads that your staff was trying to take care of. They didn't have enough legal background, excuse me, strike that completely. Whoa, that was a slip. They didn't have enough paralegal type support, legal clerks and all of that. You are now the prosecutor. What have you observed since you took me on that tour and horrified me? What have you decided is the problem?
Well, first of all,
Please identify yourself.
Mitch Roth, prosecuting attorney for the County of Hawaii, and thank you all for allowing me to come before you again. Kind of unexpected, but first of all, we want to thank both the mayor and Department of Finance for the budget that has been submitted, because it greatly helps our office having these extra positions that have been put through. As to what the need is, and the tours, actually I brought a couple more of you, and I invite all of you to come over to our offices to take a look and see what the needs are. I think I just brought Council Chair Yoshimoto the other day, and I brought Councilman Ilagan. Actually, there were meetings, and we actually were able to just take a tour and show you some of the needs. And right now, because of some of the changes that the judiciary has put forward, it's been difficult. Our clerical have been working, just overtime is kind of crazy. I think one of the questions we asked one of the clerical was how many weekends you haven't come in, and I think the clerical that we talked to said they were there pretty much every weekend. Those are union people. So we are.
And they get paid overtime.
They get paid overtime. The deputies that stay overtime do not get overtime. We are, it's kind of an interesting position you're putting us in right now, because we do support the mayor and his budget. We do need the positions, and we know that there's money constraints that are here, but it is pretty difficult right now with the positions to keep up to date with things. I think one of the questions when I took Council Chair Yoshimoto to the screener's office, he was screening a case. I was getting ready for grand jury, and the question was, what was the date of that case? And I think it was February 2012, and that was a major felony case.
So you're telling us
There's
the
a lot
cases
of
are not being prosecuted as timely as you would like them because of the lack of staff. Your union staff is working every single weekend on overtime.
Not every single one of them, but we have people that have been working pretty much every weekend.
Okay. All
And
right.
it's just, you have to understand, and the mayor has talked to everybody about bringing down overtime. If we don't keep up with the court's demands, we can get sanctioned for that, and that's could be a monetary sanction.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ford. Any other comments from council members? Ms. Seal?
I'd like Nancy Crawford to come forward.
Good morning, I'm Nancy Crawford, Director of Finance.
Thank you. I heard the mayor state this morning that you've lectured him on the fund balance and how whether we can take from there or not. And I'd like to try and understand that better if you could help us, because I think we'd all like to grab money from there. I mean, I was figuring out that according to the amended budget, there was about $18 million in additional property taxes that would be collected if we raise the rates to the suggested amount. And in my mind, I was thinking, well, I know we need to fund this budget, but could we take some of that 18 million from the fund balance and maybe raise the rates half as much? But I was told that that isn't really so simple. So If you could explain that.
Well, that's correct, and you're talking about a significant amount of money there as well. The fund balance, calculating the fund balance is a complex process. It involves carry forward from prior year because we have, as the mayor said, when we have generated excess fund balance, we have every year over these last years, we have held that. We have not come back to reappropriate it for anything else. We held that and carried it forward because we understand what's coming forward. We are budgeting, forecasting for beyond the current budget year, and that money has been essential in getting us to the point that we are at today, without any other changes or increases, and being able to continue to provide those services.
Wait, excuse me, just could you back up just a little bit? So the fund balance that's projected, is that already appropriated into the new budget, or is it
The
separate?
the proposed budget currently has $21.65 million of fund balance in it as a revenue source in order to achieve a balanced budget.
So it's incorporated into the,
That's in there
balance the
already.
budget.
And that, in March, we had 20 million, and we reevaluated. There's a complex process by which we predict fund balance. We know what our fund balance was at the end of 2012, and in many counties, they would never budget more than that fund balance excess fund balance that they already knew that they had at that point, which we have about $14.7 million. So when we come in and we're looking at what we could consider budgeting for next year, we have this excess amount of $14.7 million. And then the balance is us trying to estimate what may be generated this year by having revenues exceed expenditures. And it isn't just revenues and expenditures. We have encumbrances that are considered as well. It's a rather complex process. We have large spreadsheets by which we do analysis. And I will tell you also, the mayor told you correctly that he asks the same question you're asking. What else can't we, take more from there? What else is there? But we take what we know that we can reasonably expect that was carried forward from prior year, assuming that this year is going well and we are on budget. Then, in addition to that, we think that we are going to have some extra savings because our revenues are exceeding our budget. That's what we can project as we ongoing doing this. Is a dynamic process, and so we're doing it on a regular basis as we move up to, but we have to cut off when we come to, to giving you an amended budget in May. And at that point, we felt we could say that we can have a $21.6 million fund balance, which helps us next year. And so that is all committed in the budget that's before you right now.
okay, so that's committed, and then there was an additional projected 14 million that was not committed into?
No, the 14 million was the amount of actual excess fund balance, and I think Deanna may come up. Sometimes she has a different way of saying it, and that may be more clear. But when we closed the books in October, last October, for 2012, we knew that we had excess fund balance of $14.7 million. So have that. That's cash in the bank. This is our savings account that we're talking about here.
And that is where, for instance, in this amendment, the 290,000 would come from?
No, we took our 14.7 million that's in the bank, and then we estimated that we could grow another $7 million during our current year operations, and we put that money all together, and that is in the budget that is before you now. The 20.1.65 is in there. Anything you do from this point that you increase fund balance with additional adjustments, you are taking the money we're pretty certain we have, you're taking the money that we estimate that we're going to be able to generate this year, and then you are kind of growing this estimated number up. Our number is based on some really tight calculations and our experience in this process. We're still projecting the balance of the year, the last, April, May, and June, and what's going to happen in those months. But doing so is how we came up with 21.65 million that is helping to balance, that is already a revenue source and balancing the budget that is before you now for fiscal year 13-14.
I think I'm understanding better now, but I still am having a hard time. How do we then grow the fund balance if you've already projected an amount that's pretty tight and accurate? How do we just grow the fund balance in order to take money from it to fund, for instance, the prosecutor?
Well, right, I mean, our projections are 21.65, so anything over and above that, I believe we would caution the council to do that because we believe that would be overestimating fund balance and could leave us in a negative situation in the coming year. If we are short, we would either have to generate additional revenue sources, which is very tough because once the raw property tax rates are set, they are set for the year, or we would have to cut the budget and cut various expenditures. In addition, not only did we look at fiscal year 14, but we're also looking at fiscal year 15. You haven't seen them yet, but we are submitting the HGA and UPW costs, from the union ratifications, and that will be on one-year future agendas. But those are multi-year agreements, so future years also are going to have significant increases in the budget due to raises. The ERS rates continue to increase for 2 more years after the fiscal year 14 budget. So there are future costs we're looking at as well. But our estimate is 21.65 based on a very detailed analysis that we've done over the last several months. So that's what we're comfortable with, and we're really not comfortable raising that anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eo. Mr. Kern?
Thank you. Yeah, quick question for Nancy or Deanna. If we lower the fund balance, so say we got the 21.65 now, want to appropriate, say for right now 290,000 or so, which would lower that fund balance. Will that have a negative effect on our credit rating if we take away from it?
Just to clarify, you'd be adding to it.
Or
So
adding to it?
the proposals are to add to it and actually grow the fund balance. It can definitely have a negative impact. It depends what the total fund balance comes out with at June 30th, which we really won't know till October. That's one of the complexities of this whole process, is we're in May trying to predict June 30th's balance, but have a lot of closing process to go through, and we won't know the number till end of September or early October. So if we miscalculate that, or they think we're frivolously budgeting and just growing revenue without really having a realistic source of why we did that, then yes, it could definitely impact our bond rating and credit rating.
Because in your sense of there's a fund balance out there, I mean, we're already projecting to use that fund balance, but if there is more additional fund balance out there, the degree to which that goes down as a result of us using more of it in the budget by increasing it as a budgetary item, then yes, that's what the rating agencies are looking at when they look at our balance after we have closed the books.
Very good. So then if we, as a county, go out and sell bonds, just for the public information, sell bonds to fix roads, infrastructures, park, whatever infrastructure improvements we may have, we will then be paying more interest, correct? Which will, we won't be able to do as many projects, correct?
Right, the interest rate is directly tied to our bond rating nowadays. It's unlike in the past when there was bond insurance, so it's directly tied to our rating.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kern. We're going to go to Mr. Iligan and then to Ms. Willie.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question for the prosecutor. How are you doing? When I was going through your office. I understand you do have a big problem. And one of the questions I had was with your clerks, you said there's legal documents that you have to make sure they're filed or else you get sanctioned. How much, what's the fees and for the sanction? By chance, do you, like how,
Luckily the court, sorry, luckily we haven't been sanctioned for them. Generally what happens if you don't comply with a court order, there's different things that can happen, and one of the things that can happen is you can get sanctioned. We had a clerical snafu not too long ago, which ended up with a deputy getting sanctioned to do some community service hours for the court. Luckily, it was community service and not fines. And I think the court kind of understood, but kind of made it clear to us that there really is no excuse that you don't have enough people.
after hearing the discussion and looking at the positions, I'm looking at the two legal clerks, and I was wondering about your situation on if you see any potential problems in the future that adding a clerk might actually help out where to avoid these sanctions. Because the last thing I would want is for the county getting any sanctions and we have to pay, might as well pay in the 30,000 for a clerk position rather than getting a fee of 100,000. So I'm not sure exactly what the fees are or what the process and your department and how close you are. And so I need your input on this.
I'm not so worried about getting the sanctions as burnout. When you have people who are working, long hours. I mean, that's a bigger concern as far as the people side of that than the sanction side. We theoretically say, okay, no overtime, we're not going to do this, and then start looking at what happens on that other thing. We'll have deputies who are not prepared in court and things like that. But I think it's, with the stuff, with the positions that the mayor has put in, and we're very thankful. The positions that this board is recommending, if we could get those out, that would be great. But again, we understand, the financial constraints of the county. I don't know how else to answer your question.
I understand. Thank you, Mr. Rao. And go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind the council, we did add 2 prosecutor positions and 2 clerks into the budget.
Right.
And this was a very well thought out budget. Like every department, why we're adding staff, we know we need police in Ka'u, we know we need police in Puna, but also we need to get those staff up and running and see what the impact is to know maybe how many future staff he needs as well. So, this is the first year, and, if it's not adequate, we'll be talking with him again before we do next year's budget as well.
Thank you. Yeah, the burnout. I think I'm burning out my legislative assistant. Well, anyway, thank you, Mr. Rao.
Thank you, Mr. Lagan. We'll go to Ms. Willie, and then Ms. Poindexter, and then Mr. Canova. Ms. Willie.
I just want everyone to not take sanctions from the court lightly. I mean, the court does not tolerate it. It comes down on the attorney themselves. Maybe we ought to deflect it if there's community service, that it's to all of us that we didn't provide it. But as Mayor Kanoy and Jay and Mitch and as an attorney, it's a really hard line in terms of those deadlines, especially in criminal cases. And there's a lot of community anger with a lot of where things are going wrong with the courts and there's not accountability. So I just want to make it very clear, if you haven't been through that system, it's not okay, let's pay this fine and move on, which sort of us civil attorneys might do, what's the better? It doesn't come down like that. And I mean, I'm really concerned that even that this amount isn't enough. I mean, I have Terry is the new deputy prosecutor, is in the office right next to me, handling everything in North Hawaii, and you know, I think she's just like around the clock working. So I also, I mean, I will definitely be supportive of this. I did want to just ask whether it's Deanna or um, Nancy Crawford a question, just make sure I understand in terms of the fund um, balance. As I understand it from last year, it was 14.5. That's what we carried over, and it's at my vague recollection sitting there when it was Pete Hoffman's office was that it was we really need to keep at least 10 to 15 in there. Better to keep it around 15, and that's what we had. That right now we have 21.5, but if really all of the numbers play out as we see right now, and it's a guesstimate, it would be actually over 30 million on one of the memos. Now that might be wrong, but my two questions are really, if we held the fund balance at it continued at 14.5, to me it seems like we would still be sound. It would be great to have it more. I also have no problem if we need to come in and raise more revenue that we're doing it in the future.
Okay,
So I just want to, from my memory from a year ago or whenever it was, I thought 14.5 was a pretty good number, and I like that number. So
Well, I think we're using that 14.5. So we had a higher number at June 30, 2012. We used 18 million in the budget that we're in right now, which left us that excess of 14.7, which we are now using in the fiscal year 14 budget, which is what's helping to get us up to that 21.65 million. So that 14.7 is already included in there.
right.
We won't know actual fund balance till we get to June 30th, 2013. But based on our analysis, we're saying fund balance will be 21.65
Okay,
million.
but there was a memo.
So the 10 to 15 million that you're referring to, I'm wondering if you're remembering the 10 to 15%. And in the county code, in chapter 2, under the budget stabilization fund, as well as GFOA best practices, does recommend that each county have a fund balance of approximately 10 to 15% of our general fund expenditures. And that would be a total of between 32 to 48 million based on the proposed budget for the general fund that's in front of you. So that might be what you're remembering. So our fund balance should really be between 32 to 48. We're not there yet, but you know, that's one of the items you might be remembering, and that was 10 to 15% of expenditures. I believe the way it is in the county code is that our fund balance plus the budget stabilization fund together would give us that 32 to 48 million.
And what is our stabilization fund now?
I didn't bring it with me, but probably just under 5 million.
Okay. Now, what if we have a fund balance of 14.5? Is that going to, are we really in danger? I mean, if we just continue our good policy from last year, and as Mayor Kanoy said, hey, let's use some of this money. No?
No.
Well, if we follow our analogy of having some money in the bank and that 14 million is in the bank, we have taken that, we have withdrawn that and put it into next year's budget.
And that would leave us at 21 right now.
No, we
Jen.
have,
The 14.7 is helping get us to the 21. It's part of the 21. So maybe I misunderstood your question.
those are monies that we are committing to help spend in operations, not anything that is left in the bank at that point. So that we're taking
Nancy,
everything.
sorry for interrupting. Our fund balance is $21.6 million, period. That's it. All the previous fund balance, previous carried over, that's rolled into the budget already. There is no 21.7, there is no 22, 23. There's 21.6. And that includes all of our previous year fund balance, including carryover fund balance. that's in the 21.6, and everything else is used to balance the budget.
So my question is,
There is no additional fund balance, there is no additional revenues. If they were, Councilwoman Willie, we would have been able to allocate that in the current budget. Any additional amendment or request for addition to funds needs to be found somewhere. We can't just take fund balance and increase it. I mean, technically you could. You could say, let's make it 30, and that gives us an extra 9 million. But that's irresponsible, and it's not good accounting practice, and it's not good financial practice. To maintain our excellent credit rating, we have to do very sound fiscal decision-making. Now, the 21.6 was arrived at after many, many months of finance review and departmental review. Now, this idea that if we don't give Mitch more positions in an amendment that we're going to get sanctioned by the court, I disagree with. We've given a couple prosecutor positions and a couple clerks positions. It's adequate. As I said, we're not skimping on public safety. I don't want to use hocus pocus boogeyman tactics here to give additional positions to prosecutors, to give additional positions to finance, to police and fire. Because if we could have, we would have. So the budget we have is as far as we're willing to go and still stand behind with fiscal assurance, understanding fiscal stability, and understanding sound financial and accounting practices. To move that number anymore would be plain and simple irresponsible. And we're not, we can sit around and talk about what about this and what about at 30 and 14.6. The budget that we have before all of you includes all of our fund balance, all of our excess fund balance, and what we're projecting will have excess going forward.
and I appreciate that there is 21, and certainly we don't want to be irresponsible. But
Certainly.
maybe we're going to might want to be a little, the difference between 14 and 21, the difference, one is conservative, one is you're on the bold side. If we were to maintain a budget carryover surplus of 14, that would give us an additional 5 million or so to add in. I mean, in terms of the numbers. Now, okay, so I'm just not completely sold that it's irresponsible. I'm not trying to.
Councilwoman,
Yeah.
this is our 5th budget with a team that has maintained our excellent credit rating over the most challenging economic environment in the county's history. The reason we got here wasn't through luck or mere good fortune. It was because of very strategic, difficult decision making. Now, I would love to say, let's get more. I mean, we've been through this. I've had Deanna, Nancy, and an entire finance team. Let's look a little more. Can we move that number? Is there additional revenue that we could find? Because everybody could use it. So what we're saying is the number you have before you is the best number we have. That all of the fund balance is already in there. That if we realize any more going forward, that's good for us. But we cannot count on that. And if the current budget, if you want to give, another 500,000 or a couple 100,000, then it's got to be taken from somewhere else, or new revenue has to be created. Because it's like saying, oh, we'll just raise the fund balance and we found the money. You didn't find the money. You made up that number, and that's what we're saying. That any number above 21.6 is a number from where? Where is that number coming from?
And
It's not a number that was derived from fiscal strategic decision making. It's not a number based on tax revenue. It's not a number based on future tax valuations and potential property tax revenue. It's a number that will just be made up. And so what we're saying is the number we have is the best number we have, and it's the only one we can in good conscience rely on for our budgeting.
I appreciate your explanation.
Ms. Willie, if I could add, just to try and help. So the 14 that you're talking or referencing was already factored into 21 point. So that's, you understand? Okay.
I understood
Okay.
that, yeah.
All right. So
I just want to go with keep it at 14 again. That's all I'm trying
Okay,
to
and
fight
then-
for.
Understood.
No, I'm not getting in between your fight, Councilwoman, and I respect your advocacy. It's your job. It's all of your jobs to
And I
fight
know you
for your
have the
community,
best help.
fight for different departments, and I respect that. I'm not trying to interfere with that dynamic process. I just wanted to provide some clarification, because otherwise we start speaking in hypotheticals, and the numbers can get very confusing if tossed around rather quickly in a short period of time. I just
Okay.
wanted to provide some
You're
clarity.
dealing with 6 novices here, so.
No. You guys are doing a wonderful job. I just want to remember that we have over 15 individual departments, and it's like 15 children. All very loved children, by the way. But to give one an extra pair of shoes, to give one more school clothes, to give one more allowance, that comes from another child because it's one family.
Well, we'll see about that.
Okay.
No, and then exactly. No.
Okay,
very much.
thank you, Ms. Willie. We're going to Ms. Poindexter and Mr. Kuno and then Ms. Iha. Ms. Poindexter.
Yeah, and I like what Ms. Sacco had stated earlier. You know, we had funded positions, 2 positions, prosecutors and then 2 clerks, and then see how that goes, because I really believe that, you know, public safety as a whole is a team effort. It's not just the prosecutor's office. It's a police department, it's a fire department as well. And I think we're being fiscally responsible by starting off that way and see how that will help. Because God forbid that there be a major disaster on this island and we have that fund balance, it'll dwindle because we're going to have to hire now double the amount of fire people and police officers at one point. So I agree that we need to keep that fund balance that's being fiscally responsible, not only physically, but we're being responsible to the people of Hawaii County, because we're looking at, you know, what some protection for them. We don't know what's coming in this during this next year. So I think I'm not supporting this at this time, just because of that. I just want to be very responsible and knowing that I don't know what's going to happen down the road, but yet you're getting 4 positions, and that will help with some of the burnout that you were talking about now, because that's 2 more clerks, and you were having clerks come in on the weekend, but now you're adding 2 more full positions of clerk and then the prosecutor. So I like what Ms. Sacco had stated. Let's see how that goes, you know. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Poindexter. Mr. Kuno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also appreciated the comments made by the Finance Department, the Mayor. Not only for our clarification, but for the public's clarification. The public needs to know what's going on with regards to our fiscal responsibility and this fund balance and everything else associated with the budget. But I, for one, will not vote for any fiscal irresponsibility. I will not vote for anything that could possibly harm our county's credit, and I will not be supporting any amendments to this fund balance for that specific reasons. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kanuha. Ms. Iha.
Thank you. And so for my understanding, if in October our projected fund balance happens to be more than we had thought, could some of that at that time, could some of these changes, which rather than do a hypothetical fund balance increase at this point, later on, if we see we did have enough fund balance carryover by October, we could add a few more of these
We could
requests.
evaluate it, but I believe we would follow our historical process of saving that for the next year. We already know fiscal year 15 is going to be a tougher challenge than fiscal year 14.
Thank you. So I think I understand it a lot better now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Iha. Mr. Kern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I pretty much just want to echo what Mr. Kanuha said. We have to be fiscally responsible. We have a lot of infrastructure projects that need to occur. We need the best credit rating we can possibly get, which will add value. It'll add quality of life, improve the quality of life here on our island. The main thing is that we do not make foolish fiscal responsible choices. We have to be prudent here. I do feel that this is prudent, and I too will not be supporting any changes to the fund balance. we have to keep that tight, and we have to be able to move forward and maintain our credit rating. That will allow us to do so much more with when we borrow and go out for those bonds, which we desperately need in all areas of the island. So I will not be supporting any of these as well. And to thank you guys for your explanation and going through it, and also thanks to the mayor for his explanation as well. I'm sure you guys have sharpened your pencils so many times that you actually had to go through packs of pencils and continue to do it. So just appreciate that, and no offense to Mr. Roth or any other department that's on this list. We have to be responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kern. Ms. Ford?
Thank you. So Nancy, would you explain to the council what happens if you've got a sudden influx of, say, $5 million, how that would impact the fund balance and the budget itself?
I see that as a hypothetical sort of fantasy windfall that might happen, and I don't think that that's really relevant to the conversation that we're having here today about the fund balance as it stands right now. And so I don't see an advantage to going down a hypothetical road like that.
I need to go down the hypothetical road. So what would this fund balance look like if an influx of $5 million came in?
I don't think that's possible to say. You're saying that in a vacuum. There are all kinds of other items that are going on just as well.
Okay,
So that's not.
Property tax increase should have no impact at all on the fund balance then. Is that what you're saying?
The property tax increase that's been proposed for this budget is part of what we did, spent months coming to agreement to balancing that with what was available from other revenue sources to say this is what we feel we need for next year's budget to be prudently setting a budget that goes forward and takes into consideration the expenditure needs of departments throughout the county. And that's going to be, that's what we are anticipating. We have set our certified values. We've proposed some tax rates that will generate revenue that balances the budget and gives us revenue to fund our expenditures.
So when I mentioned $5 million, I'm going down a strange path, but you've already projected that we're going to have a property tax increase that's already in the budget. Is that correct?
That's correct. There is a property tax rate, as is well known here.
Yes.
We have a property tax proposed increase and adjustment in rates to be able to balance a budget and have a budget that can meet the needs of the county.
All right, so let me see if I understand this. You're saying that if we don't get a property tax increase, this budget is really kind of, I'm trying to think of the word you used, it's a phantom budget. Because if we don't get the property increase, you can't do all the things that the mayor has tried to do in this budget. Is that correct?
That's exactly what it
That's,
is.
yeah.
Okay,
That's
so
exactly what it is.
I want the public to I want the public to understand that, if I say, I made up this number $5 million and say if we got an influx, you're saying it doesn't make any difference. But you're saying that you want to have a property tax increase, and if we don't get the property tax increase, all the wonderful things that you've done in this budget are basically gone, and we're back to last year's situation.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to make
If
sure
there
I
is no
understand
property
that.
tax increase, there is no additional police officers in Ka'u. There is no additional lifeguards in Ka'u. There is no additional police officers in Puna. There is no additional mass transit routes. There is no additional services through information technology. I think what Nancy was responding to, Councilman, is your question. It said, if there is an influx of 5 million, how does that impact the budget? And Nancy was correct in saying that calls for speculation. It's a hypothetical. Where is the 5 million coming from? If your question was posited that if 5 million came from source A or source B, then it would be a comment of which she could address.
All right.
But to say that, what would we do if 5 million just materializes, I think Nancy was absolutely correct in saying she cannot comment on that because it calls for speculation on a hypothetical that isn't based in fact. So if there's a hypothetical that is based on fact, then certainly she could comment on that. But she cannot comment on, that's like saying if 20 million comes down tomorrow, we don't need to raise any property tax rates to balance. And the answer would be, of course.
Let me try my question again. You know, Nancy, that I have a bill coming up, and I'm not gonna discuss the details of the
Well,
bill.
Ms. Ford, let's stick to your amendment because you're gonna run out of time because you're in your second opportunity. Don't you
Thank
wanna wrap up?
No, I don't. I wanna, if, we are $17 million in arrears right now on collecting property taxes. I plan something tomorrow that could potentially bring in about $5 million. But what you're telling me is that, and the council members are telling me, is if something comes out of the fund balance, they're gonna vote no. I can understand why they would vote no. I'm not, that's an individual thing that we have to do. But that also means that we won't go after that $5 million.
I could comment on that, on your proposal.
Yes.
That-
We gotta be careful.
Well, we don't wanna talk about it till it's
Yeah,
on the
yeah, yeah.
agenda.
We'll
so-
come back tomorrow and talk
Tomorrow's a
about
good day. Tomorrow's a good day.
So
Let
Ms.
me just talk.
Yeah.
If I was
Yeah.
to change
Yeah.
the property tax collection system in the county of Hawaii, if I was to come in and ask this distinguished body to let's shorten the collection period before we proceed with foreclosures and taking homes away from people, we change it from 3 years to 2 years. And that we go and collect this 17 million in a quicker period of time. Even if such a proposal was floated, it wouldn't affect this budget before us, because we'd have to implement that proposal, and that would be for the following year. For the subsequent fiscal year, those savings could potentially be realized. If we were to adjust how we collect property taxes that are in arrears, and we wanted to expedite, I would say, the foreclosure process to fast track back property taxes, that still would not help this budget before us. That the monies that would be collected, say $5 million, from expediting property tax collections, that would go towards fiscal year 15's balancing, that it would not balance the budget we have before us.
Okay, so that's a hypothetical situation. We don't have it before us. So Ms. Ford, anything else before we move on? Okay, Ms. Willie, second opportunity. We're gonna.
Okay, just, I would like to table this till May 30th, and my reason for doing so is, we have a proposed contingency budget for, maybe we're not going to approve all of that. Again, we're assuming, certain money's already spent. As the mayor said, is we can juggle it among the different accounts that we have. So, I do think this is important. I do agree with, Councilmember Kern and Newhouse that none of us want to be irresponsible most of the time. And so I do think this is important, and I'd like to table it after we've heard all of the other amendments and considerations. So I'm moving that we postpone the vote on this item until May 30th. Do I have a second?
You would need a second, otherwise it's not a valid motion. I don't see anyone or hear anyone seconding you, so Ms. Willie, that motion. Are you
For the sake of discussion, I'll second.
Okay. So there's a motion to postpone till May 30th. Discussion on the postponement, Ms. Willie, I think you already stated your reasons.
I've stated, I think it's important, but we're trying to balance and not be irresponsible. Let's hear what are the other issues or potential expenditures in the budget, so.
Okay, Ms. Ford, you have your light on?
Yes, I'm going to support this particular postponement. One, because of the particular department, although I think everything that I put on here is really important. But Ms. Willie has just pointed out something. There's $900,000 in contingency funds in this budget for the legislative branch. It's hard for me to let that go to the legislative branch when we're having so much problems over on the administrative side of this government. So I do want to think about this a little bit more.
Okay, so that's on the postponement. Mr. Onishi.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will not be supporting the postponement. I think we need to move on, and we've heard from finance and from the mayor already, the fund balance is already hit its top. And so we can't, unless you guys can find other revenue sources, like for example, if you guys could raise the property tax more, or raise the rates much higher, that's where you can get more funding for getting these positions. But we already heard the fund balance is up to its maximum, and we need to move on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Onishi. Any, Mr. Kern or Ms. Eoff?
Yes, if we were to postpone this one, then we have to postpone all of these, because all of them are suggesting that we increase the fund balance, and I think we still have a question lingering there, or maybe not, but I do wanted to ask Ms. Crawford one more question, but it might help me to know if I support a postponement. And that is increasing the fund balance, which is what we have to do in order to add these proposed amendments. Does that change the total of the budget?
Yes.
The-
You
so
are
it
growing the
increases
budget
to-
with every one of these amendments.
So we
That
increase
is,
the total budget.
you are saying that that's gonna be a revenue source, you're kind of
Okay. Thank you.
estimating money, projecting some money out there coming from somewhere and growing the budget by that amount, yes.
Okay, on the postponement, Mr. Kern?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too will not support the postponement. We're here to do our job, and the job is to get done now. It's clear. We've heard what we need to hear. We've heard what we need to hear. I believe that we should just move forward and do our job and vote, so we can actually start getting this off our table, and we can focus on what we have left on our table.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kern. Mr. Iligan?
I too will not support the postponement.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the postponement? If not, Mr. Clerk, on the postponement.
Ms. Eoff,
No.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Iligan,
No.
Mr. Kanuha,
No.
Mr. Kern,
No.
Mr. Onishi, Ms. Poindexter,
No.
Ms. Willie,
Aye.
Chair Yoshimoto.
No.
Chair Yoshimoto, you have 7 noes.
Okay,
Or,
so-
excuse me, 2 ayes.
2 ayes. Okay, so motion fails. Okay, so we're on the second round of discussion on the amendment. Mr. Iligan, any final thoughts?
Okay, with the fund balance, the best person I know is my father. And the one thing my father taught me is, when I was younger, was savings. Looking at the old budget, it was what, 365, and we had 14 million fund balance. That's 3.8% on savings. Now we have 394, and we have 21 million. That's 5.3 savings. What we should do is start exercising discipline, and let's not touch this fund balance. I will start exercising my discipline by not supporting this because it's taken away from our fund balance. And I want to show the public that I'm here for you to make sure that we save and we have a rainy day fund. And as long as I'm in this position, I'll make sure that our savings won't be touched.
Thank you, Mr. Iligan. Ms. Eoff?
Thank you. But I think, Mr. Ligon, and if someone, Nancy, could come up again, I think we still have a little bit of confusion, because the 21 million is not actually what's being saved. That has been incorporated into the new budget. It's being spent. So what these, okay, that's correct. So what these proposals do is add to the fund balance. It's not taking away from a savings. It's adding money that we don't know if we have or not, because it's adding. There will be some more money in the fund balance. In October, we'll know what that is. Right now, we don't know what it is, and that's what we intend to save for the future fiscal year. I think I said that right.
Okay. Real quick, go ahead.
Councilmember, thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, any other discussion? If not, Mr. Clerk, on the amendment?
Ms. Eoff, Ms. Ford,
Excuse me, I want to make sure I'm voting on the right thing. Are we on the third, number 3? And this is regarding a postponement. Or no, this is the final vote. Yes.
Mr. Iligan,
No.
Mr. Kanuha,
No.
Mr. Kern,
No.
Mr. Onishi,
No.
Ms. Poindexter,
No.
Ms. Willie,
Yes.
Chair Yoshimoto.
No.
Chairman Yoshimoto, you have 2 ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So, communication 150.33 fails. Next, Ms. Ford, it's 11:55. Yes. Council members, why don't we take a break for lunch? 1 o'clock enough time, or 1:30? 1:30? Okay. We'll be in recess till 1:30.
Isn't it all right? There's no all rises in council here.
Not only no.
You're
In the
not
beginning,
recorded.
baby, you were late.
An all rise.
All rise, and then we yeah.
We're not one person with a sign.
Okay.